The most feared weapon in history is not the sword or the gun, it's a ruthless mind. Power doesn't belong to the strongest, it belongs to the one who cannot be broken. What truly paralyzes people is not cruelty, but a mind that refuses to bend. Strength of mind comes not from cruelty, but from discipline and clarity. This is where most people are mistaken. They confuse ruthlessness with brutality, thinking that to be feared one must be harsh, violent, or merciless. But cruelty is easy. Any fool with a temper can raise his voice, crush another with insults, or lash out in anger. That is not strength. That is weakness dressed in noise. True strength is something quieter, something far more unsettling. It is the stillness of a person who does not break when the world demands that they bend. Discipline is the foundation of that strength. Without discipline, the mind is like a wild horse, powerful but uncontrollable, constantly jerking in every direction, wasting its energy. Discipline harnesses that power. It is the ability to command yourself before you ever attempt to command others. A disciplined mind knows when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to wait. It is not driven by impulse, but by intention. And people sense that. They sense when you cannot be provoked, when you cannot be rushed, when you cannot be baited into losing your composure. That alone is enough to make them hesitate, to make them feel the weight of your presence. Clarity is what gives discipline its direction. Imagine looking through a foggy window. You can see shapes, but not clearly enough to act with confidence. That is how most people live, lost in their emotions, blinded by their desires, overwhelmed by fears. Clarity cuts through the fog. It allows you to see situations as they are, not as you wish them to be. It strips away excuses, distractions, and illusions. When you possess clarity, you are no longer swayed by appearances or by the noise of the crowd. You look at reality with clean eyes, and that reality guides your decisions. Strength of mind, then, is not measured by how much pain you can inflict, but by how little you allow yourself to be swayed. The disciplined and clear mind can sit in the midst of chaos and remain unmoved. When insults fly, it hears only empty words. When temptations come, it does not reach. When fear whispers, it does not tremble. That kind of steadiness is far more terrifying to others than any act of cruelty. Cruelty provokes resistance, but composure commands respect. Think of the generals in history who were outnumbered, surrounded, and yet unshaken. Think of the leaders who, while others panicked, spoke calmly, decided swiftly, and turned disaster into victory. Their enemies expected panic and weakness, but instead found themselves facing a wall of iron. That is the paralysis I speak of. The paralysis that comes when people realize their words, their tricks, their threats, their promises have no power over you. A cruel person is predictable. They will lash out, but a disciplined and clear mind is unpredictable. It cannot be baited, cannot be manipulated, cannot be owned. That is what frightens people. They look for cracks in your armor, and they find none. They look for your breaking point, and it does not exist. Strength of mind does not mean the absence of feeling. It means the mastery of it. The disciplined mind feels anger, but does not obey it. It feels fear, but does not kneel to it. It feels desire, but does not become a slave to it. It directs emotion instead of being directed by it. That is why it is ruthless. Not because it is unfeeling, but because it refuses to let feelings dictate its path. And here lies the secret. Cruelty exhausts itself, but discipline endures. A cruel person burns out, surrounded by enemies and consumed by bitterness. A disciplined and clear mind, however, grows stronger with time, sharper with experience, and more commanding with every test it survives. It becomes a force that cannot be ignored, a presence that unsettles without raising a hand. When people encounter such a mind, they stop, they hesitate, they second-guess themselves, because deep down they know this is not someone who can be tricked, softened, or bent. This is someone who sees through them, someone whose will is sharper than their scheme. That is the kind of strength that paralyzes people, not cruelty, but discipline and clarity. Ruthlessness is about removing weakness, not humanity. This is one of the greatest misconceptions about power and strength. People hear the word ruthless and instantly picture someone cold, heartless, cruel to others, incapable of compassion or love. But that is not ruthlessness. That is savagery. Ruthlessness in its truest form is not about discarding your humanity, but about discarding the parts of yourself that make you easy to control, easy to exploit, and easy to defeat. It is not about becoming less human, but about becoming a sharper, clearer, and more resilient version of yourself. Weakness takes many forms, and most of them are invisible. Weakness can be the need for approval, the craving to be liked, the constant seeking of validation from others. It can be the inability to say no when no is the correct answer. It can be the habit of clinging to things or people that drain your strength instead of feeding it. Weakness often hides behind good intentions, behind softness, behind the desire to please everyone, but it always costs you more than it gives. Ruthlessness begins when you recognize these forms of weakness and remove them with precision, as a surgeon removes disease from the body. It is not hatred of the world, it is protection of yourself. To be ruthless is to look at your own habits and ask, what here makes me vulnerable? What here makes me manipulable? For example, if you cannot bear the thought of being disliked, then anyone who threatens to withhold affection from you has power over you. If you are desperate for approval, then flattery can bend you. If you are controlled by anger, then provocation will trap you every time. If you are controlled by fear, then threats will silence you. These are weaknesses, not because they are emotions every human feels them, but because they can be used against you. To remove them is to reclaim your freedom. Machiavelli understood this well. He did not say that leaders must be cruel for the sake of cruelty, but that they must be able to act without being enslaved by emotions that weaken judgment. Compassion, generosity, kindness. These are powerful forces, but only when they are under your command. When kindness becomes a leash around your neck, pulling you into decisions that hurt you, it is weakness. But when kindness is deliberate, offered when it strengthens your position and withdrawn when it endangers you, then it is no longer weakness. It is strategy. The ruthless person does not discard humanity. They master it. Think of ruthlessness as pruning a tree. You do not destroy the tree. You cut away the parts that are diseased, the branches that weaken the whole. You cut so that the tree may grow stronger, taller, and healthier. Weakness is rot. Humanity is life. To remove the weakness is to save the humanity, not to erase it. In fact, it is only through ruthlessness that your humanity can survive intact in a world that constantly seeks to exploit it. Without strength, kindness becomes a liability. Without clarity, compassion becomes manipulation. But when weakness is removed, you can show kindness without being used, and you can give compassion without being drained. Consider relationships. How many people remain in destructive connections because they cannot bear to walk away? They confuse loyalty with enslavement, love with dependence, forgiveness with submission. That is weakness disguised as virtue. Ruthlessness says, I will love, but not at the cost of my dignity. I will forgive, but not endless. I will stay, but only if staying nourishes me as much as it does the other. That is not cruelty. It is balance. It is drawing the line that protects your spirit from being consumed. Or think of ambition. Many have dreams, but few pursue them ruthlessly. Why? Because fear of failure paralyzes them. Because the comfort of the familiar outweighs the challenge of the unknown. Because they want guarantees before they act. Weakness whispers, wait, delay. Someone else will do it, or it will come easier later. Ruthlessness cuts off that whisper. It says, I will move forward even if I must do so alone. I will act even without certainty, because waiting is a greater risk than trying. This is not the absence of humanity. It is the sharpening of it. It is the decision to remove hesitation, not hope, to remove excuses, not dreams. In truth, ruthlessness makes your humanity more powerful, not less. A person who has cut away weakness is someone who can stand firm when others crumble. They can offer real help because they are not drowning themselves. They can be generous without being exploited, loyal without being trapped, kind without being naive. People often mistake softness for compassion, but the deepest compassion comes from strength. It is the compassion of someone who can look another in the eye and say, I will not let you destroy me, and because I protect myself, I have the strength to help you too. The world respects this balance, even if it fears it. When others see that you are not controlled by weakness, they may call you ruthless, but deep down they know that you are free. They see that your choices are not made out of desperation, but out of deliberate intent. And that paralyzes them, because most people cannot imagine living without those chains. They cannot imagine acting without the need for approval, without the fear of rejection, without the compulsion to give in to every emotion. You, standing before them without those burdens, seem almost otherworldly. That is the power of ruthlessness. So understand this: to be ruthless is not to lose your humanity. It is to protect it, by stripping away what threatens. It is to become unbreakable, not by becoming unfeeling but by mastering the feelings that break others. It is not about being cruel. It is about refusing to be weak. And in a world where weakness is exploited at every turn, there is no greater kindness you can give yourself than to be ruthless with the things that would make you small. ChatGPT said, power flows to those who control perception and emotion, and this is one of the most enduring truths about human nature. People believe that power comes only from brute force, from wealth, or from titles, but these are merely tools. The real engine of power lies in the human mind, in how people see you, and how you make them feel. Perception is reality for most, and emotion is the current that drives their decision. If you can master these two forces, how others perceive you and how they feel in your presence, you command influence that no weapon or law can rival. Think about history's most influential leaders. Some ruled vast empires without lifting a sword, not because they were the strongest warriors, but because they understood how to shape the image others held of them. They knew that men follow not facts, but appearance. If people perceive you as strong, they treat you as strong, even before you act. If they perceive you as weak, they treat you as weak, even when you may have hidden strength. This is why Machiavelli emphasized appearance over reality. The truth matters, but only in your private calculations. The image is what the world reacts to. Perception is not deception, it is strategy. It is not about being false, but about understanding that people rarely see beyond the surface. When you appear confident, people believe you are confident. When you appear unshaken, people assume you are unshakable. When you appear ruthless, people give you the respect that comes with it. The ruthless mind knows this, and crafts perception with care. It understands that hesitation, nervousness, or inconsistencies are small cracks that others will exploit. But if your presence communicates clarity and certainty, you command obedience without even asking. Emotion is the second current of power. Humans pride themselves on reason, but most of their choices are ruled by how they feel. They vote, follow, fight, and surrender, not because of logic, but because of fear, hope, admiration or dread. If you can move their emotions, you can guide their action. This does not mean you must always inspire love or joy. Sometimes fear is the stronger tool. Machiavelli himself said it is safer to be feared than loved, because fear binds more tightly than affection. Yet the true master of emotion does not rely on only one feeling. They know how to summon the right one for the moment. Consider how leaders command loyalty. Some inspire devotion by making followers feel seen, valued, and part of something great. Others paralyze resistance by radiating authority so strongly that defiance feels impossible. Both methods depend not on brute force, but on emotion. One draws through hope, the other through fear. To control emotion is to hold the strings that make people move, even when they do not realize they are being moved. Perception and emotion often work together. Appearances shape feelings. If someone perceives you as wise, they will feel if they perceive you as unyielding, they will feel respect, even fear. If they perceive you as unpredictable, they will feel caution. Every gesture, every word, every silence contributes to the emotional atmosphere you create. The ruthless mind understands this and uses it deliberately. It never speaks without purpose, never acts without awareness of the image it projects, never allows its presence to be anything less than commanding. Weak minds reveal too much. They pour out their emotions without restraint, letting others see insecurity, desperation, or eagerness. And once people see those emotions, they exploit them. But the disciplined, ruthless mind keeps its emotions under control, releasing only what strengthens its position. It may appear warm when warmth is useful, stern when sternness is needed, silent when silence creates weight. In this way it controls both how it is perceived and how others feel in response. Imagine two generals standing before their armies. One looks anxious, shifting, doubting, his voice unsteady. Even if his strategy is sound, his soldiers feel uncertainty, and uncertainty spreads like poison. The other general stands tall, calm, and assured, his words few but sharp, his composure unbroken. His soldiers may be outnumbered, but they feel confidence, and confidence spreads like fire. The difference lies not in skill alone but in perception and emotion. One communicates weakness, the other strength, and the armies move according to what they perceive and feel. In everyday life the same law applies. In business, in relationships, in negotiations, people are less swayed by the content of what you say than by the emotion you stir and the perception you create. A weak idea delivered with absolute confidence often carries more weight than a brilliant idea delivered with hesitation. A calm silence, in the face of provocation, often commands more respect than a loud argument. What paralyzes people is not always the substance of your power, but the aura of it. The ruthless mind does not leave perception and emotion to chance. It crafts them as carefully as an artist shapes a painting. It chooses its words with intention, its expressions with precision, its timing with patience. It asks constantly, what do I want them to see? What do I want them to feel? And acts according. Others may accuse this of manipulation, but it is simply mastery of human nature. To ignore these forces is to live blindly, tossed by the perceptions and emotions others impose on you. To master them is to hold the invisible reins of influence. And remember this, controlling perception and emotion begins with controlling your own. If you cannot command how you feel, you cannot command how others feel in your presence. If you cannot master your own image, the world will define it for you. Discipline of the self is the root of control over others. A person who cannot be provoked, who cannot be flattered into foolishness, who cannot be broken by fear, projects an aura that unsettles everyone around them. People sense that power, and they react to it, even if they cannot explain why. Power, therefore, is not just about resources or authority.
It is about atmosphere. It is about the silent pull you create in a room, the way people hesitate before speaking against you, the way they lean in when you speak. It is about shaping what they see and guiding what they feel. That is why power flows not to the loudest, not to the strongest, but to those who master perception and emotion. And once you hold that mastery, you need little else. A sharp mind must be unshakable under pressure, unafraid of judgment. It is easy to appear strong when the sea is calm, when everything goes according to plan, when no one is challenging you. But the true test of the mind is not in comfort, it is in chaos. Pressure exposes what lies beneath the surface. Some collapse the moment difficulties appear, others panic when eyes turn toward them in expectation or judgment. But the mind that is sharp, disciplined, and ruthless stands firm, like a rock that does not move no matter how violently the storm crashes against it. This quality is what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary, the easily broken from the truly unbreakable. Pressure is inevitable. In life there will always be moments when everything converges against you, when deadlines close in, when decisions must be made with limited time, when people expect you to fail, when whispers of doubt fill the air. Most people crack in these moments because their minds are trained only for ease, not for resistance. But the sharp mind welcomes pressure, because it knows pressure is proof of importance. Diamonds are made under pressure, steel is forged in fire, and the mind is sharpened in trial. To resist pressure is to remain dull, to embrace it is to become unshakable. To be unshakable under pressure is not to feel nothing, but to remain steady despite feeling everything. Fear may whisper, anxiety may rise, and doubt may creep in, but the sharp mind does not allow those voices to dictate action. Instead, it listens calmly, acknowledges them, and then chooses clarity over chaos. This ability comes from discipline, from long training in self-command. The person who is unshakable has practiced silence in the face of provocation, patience in the face of urgency, and calm in the face of hostility. These small rehearsals prepare them for the great trials, where their steadiness radiates like a shield. What makes such steadiness so powerful is how it affects others. People draw their cues from those around them. When they see panic in your eyes, they feel panic in themselves. When they see hesitation, their faith weakens. But when they see unshakable composure, they feel reassured, even if the situation is dire. Leaders who master calmness under pressure control not only their own fate, but the emotions of everyone around them. This is why armies follow generals who stand still under fire, why crowds rally behind speakers who speak with certainty amidst chaos, and why individuals respect those who remain unmoved in the face of attack. But unshakable strength does not end with handling pressure. The sharp mind must also be unafraid of judgment. Human beings live under the constant gaze of others, and many are enslaved by it. They are paralyzed by the thought of being disliked, mocked, or criticized. They conform not because it is right, but because it is safe. They abandon their own vision to protect themselves from whispers and stares. This dependence on approval is one of the greatest weaknesses a person can have, because it chains them to the opinions of others. A sharp mind, however, refuses those chains. It listens to judgment, but it does not obey it. It values truth over applause, direction over popularity, and results over the noise of the crowd. To be unafraid of judgment does not mean to be reckless or arrogant. It means to recognize judgment for what it is, an opinion often born of ignorance, envy, or fear. The world will always judge you, whether you are silent or outspoken, whether you succeed or fail, whether you rise or fall. If you seek to avoid judgment, you will spend your life in hesitation, pleasing no one, and achieving nothing. But if you embrace the reality that judgment is unavoidable, you free yourself to act according to your vision, not according to the expectations of others. This is the liberation of the sharp mind. It acts with clarity, guided by its own compass, indifferent to the storms of opinion around it. Think of the innovators, the leaders, the creators who changed the world. Almost all of them were judged harshly in their time. They were mocked, resisted, even hated, yet they remained unshaken. They did not let the sneers of the crowd dictate their course, because they understood that the crowd sees only the present, while they themselves see the future. To be sharp is to endure ridicule with patience, to accept misunderstanding without losing direction, and to stand alone if necessary until the world catches up. Judgment is only noise, and the sharp mind treats it as such. This fearlessness, in the face of judgment, creates its own aura of power. People admire those who seem indifferent to opinion, because most are enslaved by it. They marvel at those who remain steady under pressure, because most collapse. This combination, unshakable under stress, and fearless before criticism, creates the presence that paralyzes others. They cannot rattle you, they cannot sway you, they cannot control you, and when they realize that, they feel a quiet dread, because they know that nothing they do will break your stance. But this quality cannot be faked for long. Pretending to be unshakable will eventually crumble if the inner foundation is weak. True sharpness must be cultivated. It comes from deliberate practice, facing discomfort instead of avoiding it, putting yourself in challenging situations until pressure becomes familiar, exposing yourself to criticism until judgment loses its sting. Each trial is a test, and each test you survive adds another layer of armor. Over time you become a fortress, not because you were born strong, but because you built strength brick by brick, trial by trial. A sharp mind must also know that being unshakable is not about stubbornness, it is about clarity. To be stubborn is to cling to your path even when it is wrong. To be sharp is to remain calm enough to adapt without fear, to change direction without losing confidence. Under pressure, the sharp mind can pivot without panic. Under judgment, it can listen without surrendering its vision. This balance of flexibility and firmness is what makes it terrifying to others. It cannot be cornered, cannot be intimidated, cannot be ruled by the forces that rule most people. In the end, a sharp mind that is unshakable under pressure and unafraid of judgment becomes something rare. A presence that others instinctively respect, not because it shouts the loudest, not because it boasts the most, but because it remains immovable where others falter. This presence is like a mountain, silent, steady, impossible to shake, and when others come against such a mind, they feel the futility of their efforts. Their tricks fail, their criticisms bounce off, their pressure dissolves into nothing. What remains is their own weakness, reflected back at them. That is the power of the sharp mind, unyielding in trial, fearless before the crowd, and sharper than any weapon they can raise against it. In the end, everything returns to a single truth. The most dangerous weapon you will ever carry is the mind you build. Not a mind poisoned by cruelty, but one disciplined enough to master itself. Ruthless enough to cut away weakness, sharp enough to shape perception and emotion, and unshakable enough to stand calm under pressure, fearless before judgment. Such a mind does not need to shout, does not need to prove, does not need to beg for respect. Its very presence commands it. This is what Machiavelli understood, that power belongs not to those who rage or demand, but to those who cannot be begged. A ruthless mind is not inhuman, it is fully human, but free of chains. It sees clearly when others are blinded, it acts decisively when others hesitate, it endures when others crumble, and because of this, it paralyzes those who stand against it, not through violence, but through an undeniable certainty that nothing can move it. So build your mind as you would build a fortress. Remove the cracks of weakness, sharpen the edges of clarity, strengthen the walls of discipline. Train yourself to command your own emotions. Before you try to command the world, let judgment pass over you like wind against stone, and when the storms of life rage, stand still, silent, resolute, immovable, for in that silence, in that steadiness, lies the kind of power that endures, a power not given, not borrowed, not begged for but created, a power that begins and ends with